So Greg Kading, thank you for coming by.
My pleasure, Vlad.
So how long were you working for the LAPD?
I was with the LAPD a little over 22 years. I had 25 years in law enforcement. I had transferred from another agency in Southern California over to LAPD back in the mid-1980s.
Okay. And how did you end up getting involved in the whole Tupac case?
Well, initially I was assigned to work on the Biggie case because that was an LA-based murder case.
Yeah.
And so I got recruited in to work a task force looking at resurrecting Biggie's murder investigation, which at that time, it was 2006, so his murder was 9 years old. And by way of investigating Biggie's murder, we got involved in investigating Tupac's murder.
Okay. And once you started investigating Tupac's murder, what did you find initially?
Well, when we were looking at Tupac's murder, we were really evaluating two theories. You know, the Suge Knight did it theory or the Southside Crips did it theory.
Yeah.
And as we began to kind of go through a process of elimination, we were able to pretty quickly dismiss the Suge Knight aspect, the Suge Knight theory behind Tupac's murder.
Right.
And that really had us focusing in on the Southside Crips.
Right, because the Suge Knight theory never made any sense to me, because you got a guy that's like 3 times the size of Tupac. Who in their right mind would try to orchestrate a hit on someone while you're in the car? I guess there was bullets all over the car. Like, this was not like a precision sniper or anything of that sort.
Yeah.
It made no sense completely.
Just on the surface, it's a rather implausible theory.
Yeah. So once you started actually looking into it, into the whole Southside Crip thing, what did you find in your initial investigation?
Well, certainly we had the MGM tape that shows Tupac Shakur getting into a fight with a Southside Crip named Orlando Anderson. That provided us, you know, at the beginning at least, a motive that these guys might turn around and retaliate. We were able to verify that there were other Southside Crips with Orlando Anderson out in Las Vegas. And then through this process of talking to people and looking at some of the old clues, we saw this very well-established association between the Southside Crips and Bad Boy Records.
Okay. So what other Southside Crips were in Las Vegas at the time that, you know, the shooting happened?
There was a group of them. There was about 10 of them out there. The primary ones that we were interested in were the ones that were in the white Cadillac. As you probably are aware, the witnesses in Tupac's murder all identified that there was this white Cadillac that was the one that drove up alongside Suge and Tupac and started shooting. So we were primarily interested in the occupants of the Cadillac. We were able to identify them as Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, a guy named DeAndre Smith, another guy named Terrence Brown, and lastly Orlando Anderson, which was the one that Tupac had been in a fight with earlier.
Okay. And Keefe D was Orlando's uncle?
That is correct. Keefe D was Orlando's uncle.
Okay. So how did you identify these 4 people in the car?
Actually, through the confession of Keefe D himself. He was the one that sat down and provided the information. He identified his nephew as sitting directly behind him. He identified the driver as Terrence Brown, and then the 4th passenger, or the 4th occupant, DeAndre Smith, as sitting in the left rear passenger seat.
Okay, so I talked to Robert Ladd and Tim Brennan about some of the stuff that you've talked about. And the one thing that they initially brought up was they had a level of doubt around this whole confession situation, because this was a Las Vegas murder case, but you were LAPD.
Correct. There were some jurisdictional issues initially. It was a Las Vegas murder, clearly. But as we began to unravel some of the events leading up to the murder, we found out that there was a solicitation for murder that took place in Los Angeles, which is obviously within our jurisdiction. So if a crime is occurring in LA, that opens the door for us to investigate it wherever it actually happens.
Okay. So was there any sort of friction or cooperation with Las Vegas PD?
Not really. They were very forthright from the beginning. We were sharing information between the LAPD and Las Vegas PD. They're a little bit, alienated because of their geographical location from the gangs in Compton. And so they relied on intelligence coming from both Compton PD and from Los Angeles PD.
Okay. So you met up with Keefe D. Okay. Where was Keefe D at the time? He was in prison?
No, Keefe D was living down here in Southern California, out in Riverside County. When we initially met up with him, we just went to his house and met him on his own property, informed him of some of the charges that we'd built up against him during a long drug investigation. And
what were the charges?
Distribution of PCP, distribution of large amounts of cocaine, and wiretap investigations, which are these electronic crimes.
Okay. Oh, what kind of wiretap crimes were you?
Using a public utility in order to commit a crime.
Okay.
So there's a lot of little technical,
okay,
white-collar type of crimes.
I see what you're saying. So you guys just basically showed up at Keefe D's house?
That's correct.
Okay. Was it you and another officer?
It was. It was me and my partner, Darren Dupree.
Okay. So you just knocked on his door unannounced?
That's correct. We actually, the garage door was open. He came outside and we encountered him initially right in his driveway.
What was the sort of initial reaction when two cops suddenly show up at your door like that?
I can't speak for him. I mean, Keefe D, comes from a long history of criminal activity and police encounters, so it wasn't his first rodeo. But I'm sure he was quite curious as to why we were there.
Okay. So when you initially started talking to him, how did you sort of present the information to him?
We sat down in his garage and we explained to him that we had been conducting a long-term covert operation, looking at him and others, members of his family even, in a big drug trafficking ring. And once he realized we knew what we were talking about, we were dropping names and talking about events that we witnessed, then he knew that there were some serious problems.
Now, why did you go to his house as opposed to bring him in?
We had, that was our kind of strategic approach, was, we knew that we needed him to talk. And so we wanted to be as cordial initially as we could. We wanted to give him the opportunity to evaluate what we're telling him and then make a decision whether or not he wanted to cooperate. So immediately we advised him, get yourself an attorney and meet us down at the U.S. Attorney's office and let's talk this out.
Okay. So he went and got an attorney?
That day, we met that afternoon in the United States Attorney's office.
Okay, so that's pretty quick.
Immediately.
Okay. So when you met up with him, was he, well, when you initially gave him all that information about all the surveillance he did and everything, was he pretty shooken up, or?
You could kind of see the wheels turning in his head. I think, he's a sophisticated, smart guy as far as street crimes go. So, he knew that we weren't bullshitting, and he had his back up against the wall. So, I think for him it was just one of these, aha moments.
So he went and met with you at the U.S. Attorney's office. And was there a deal that you offered him at that point?
It's not a deal, it's an agreement. It's known as a proffer agreement. And he's given the opportunity through a agreement between his attorney and the United States attorney to evaluate whether or not it's in his best interest to cooperate. And so that was the arrangement, that he would sit down and tell us everything we wanted to know about anything we asked, and that he had to be entirely truthful, or else he would be charged, not only for the drug crimes, but for potentially his own confession.
Okay. So he sat down with you and started confessing?
That's correct.
How long did he talk for?
Well, we had multiple interviews. It wasn't just one time. We sat down and spoke a variety of times on a variety of different topics. But specifically the Tupac and Biggie cases were the ones that we were the most interested in. So we spoke for hours over a long period of time. Keefe, today what we're going to do, we're just going to go over with a fine-tooth comb the Las Vegas incident. We're going to draft up our report as regarding that specific thing. and then we're going to cover a few other things that we do have to emphasize to you that everything in this report has to be right on, because if down the road it's determined that some of these details are incorrect, then everything's off the table. So everything in this report cannot be like that report.
Hey, I want to say this though too. I feel like I said that day, don't bullshit me and I won't bullshit y'all. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, Lane starts blasting. You say Suge looks over, he sees you. He looks right at you.
Yeah, he looks at me.
Okay.
Why are you looking right at me?
Fucking known each other since we were 7, 8 years old.
When he looks over at you, and then, you know, Tupac's busy getting shot. Evidently, the story is Tupac's trying to either get out
In
of
the
the line.
back seat or something.
Yeah, what do you see happening inside of their
Jumping
car?
in. I seen a bullet going Suge head. I thought he was dead.
So Orlando shot across Dre?
He leaned over on the window. We rolled down the window, popped.
Who was it?
They would drove on my side. I would have popped them. You know what I'm saying? But they was on the other side.
Right.
The group had gone out to Las Vegas without any intent whatsoever to have any problems. They did not go out there with any specific motivation to hunt down Tupac or to have any encounters with Suge Knight. But just by the nature of the rivalry that was taking place between them, they began to have encounters. There was an encounter between the Southside Crips and Suge Knight and his entourage in the arena prior to the event where Orlando Anderson and Tupac Shakur get into a fight.
In Vegas, there was an encounter?
Correct. Prior to the videotape that we see of Tupac and Orlando Anderson getting into an altercation.
Okay, I didn't know about this part. This is the first time hearing about this. So what actually happened before the videotaped altercation?
Well, inside the arena, there was just a brief encounter. Now, these Crips and Bloods from these sets, they know each other. They've encountered each other before during other confrontations. And so they recognize each other. And there's a little bit of a push and shove match. Nothing serious, but a statement is made from Suge Knight that he's untouchable. And the Crip replies, well, you can be touched. And this was set a little bit of a adversarial type of setting or environment right off the bat, as soon as they saw each other.
Okay. So then what happened after the fight?
After the fight, Tupac Shakur and several members of the Mob Piru, Suge's entourage, and members of Death Row, they're all kind of milling around. I don't know if you've been to the MGM, but after a fight, it's just, it's pandemonium. There's just people everywhere. And because there was already this encounter, Trayvon Lane, who had had a prior confrontation with Orlando Anderson, recognized Orlando from a prior fight between the two of them, and tells Tupac, hey, be on guard, there's one of our enemies. Tupac takes it upon himself to go over and initiate a altercation with Orlando. The rest of the Mob Piru run over and jump in as kind of a gangbang, and that's what happened at the MGM.
Okay. What happened after that altercation with Orlando?
After the altercation, Orlando kind of licked his wounds and went and found his uncle, Keefe D, who was nearby. Keefe D was with some other Southside Crips and along with some characters from New York, some associates from New York, including a guy named Eric Zip Martin, who was a drug associate of Keefe D's. And they just had a conversation about the fact that Orlando was just attacked by not only Tupac, but from the Death Row entourage, and they planned retaliation. And Zip and his crew offer to assist Keefe D and his crew, and Keefe D says, no, we got this, we can handle it. However, they didn't take any guns out there. They weren't stupid enough to travel across the Nevada and California desert with guns and to Las Vegas. And so Zip, who did have a gun, offered his, and they went out to the parking lot, and he went into his car, got a hold of the Glock 40 caliber gun and handed it to Keefe D, and off they went in search of Tupac and Suge.
So it was just one gun?
Just one gun.
Okay. So How did they end up actually running into Suge and Tupac's car?
The Southside Crips knew, everybody in Vegas knew that, had any interest, that Tupac Shakur and Mike Tyson and other celebrities were going to be over at Suge Knight's 662 Club. So the Crips went there initially, kind of lied in wait, and once there was an awareness by the mob Pyrus that the Crips were in the vicinity, the Crips thought it best just to kind of pack up their bags and move out. So as they were leaving, they're going down the street, they go to a liquor store, and shortly after departing from that liquor store, they happened to see Tupac and Suge and this entourage of vehicles, or this caravan of vehicles, going down the street in the opposite direction.
Okay, so was there any footage, video footage from the liquor store, or was there, was the liquor store owner ever confirmed that they saw them? Or no?
Keep in mind, we don't gain this information until we get Keefe D's confession in 2009.
Oh.
So it's way after the fact that we even become aware that they had gone to a liquor store.
Okay, so they turn around, they drive the opposite direction, and then what happens?
They're looking into the different vehicles. Orlando Anderson gets the gun from Keefe D, who is in the front seat. He hands it to the back seat. Orlando takes it. And as they pull up along the passenger side of Suge's BMW, Orlando leans out the window and begins firing in the direction of both Tupac and Suge.
Okay. And then what happens next?
What happens next is, this all happens in almost in a matter of just seconds. The white Cadillac begins to peel away, and it makes a right turn at the intersection. There's some females that are in a convertible Sebring who duck down because they hear the gunfire just over their shoulders and behind them. They also try to make a right turn at that intersection. They almost have a collision with the white Cadillac. And then another vehicle that was in the entourage with Suge Knight, driven by a guy named Alton McDonald, Buntry, he takes off initially with his passenger Neckbone to chase the white Cadillac, and there's some exchange of gunfire between the white Cadillac and the entourage vehicle. Meanwhile, Suge Knight is trying to, react to this whole thing, get out of that immediate kill zone, and he does a U-turn in order to go the other direction.
Okay, so how many shots were fired at Suge's car?
According to the reports, there's two. There's two claims. It was either 7 or 9. So depending on whether you want to count shell casings or whether you want to count the number of times the vehicle's hit, there's a variable there.
So the vehicle was hit 7 times?
Correct.
So they basically just unloaded the clip, more or less?
No, a 9mm Glock carries, more rounds than that.
Okay. How many rounds in a 9mm?
It depends on whether it was a subcompact or whether full size, but upwards of like 13 rounds.
Okay, so half a clip, more or less.
Correct.
Okay. And the shots are all over the car?
Yeah, they are. They go from the back, to the door, right outside of where Tupac's seated, and then also some from the kind of a front direction, like through a windshield.
Okay. Tupac was hit how many times?
Tupac was hit 4 times, I believe.
And Suge was hit?
Suge took a wound to the back of his head, and supposedly there's a metal fragment still inside of the base of his skull. It's undetermined whether or not that's a bullet fragment or whether it's a fragment of metal that came from, the shrapnel of metal in the car.
Okay. So the white Cadillac takes off. Suge makes a U-turn and tries to get the car out of the area. So someone from the death row entourage started to chase the white Cadillac and shoot at it?
Very briefly.
Very briefly. How many shots were fired, do you know?
Well, we know that the vehicle that was giving chase, the Toyota Supra that was driven by Alton McDonald, it suffered at least one gunshot wound to that vehicle. There was a bullet that went into the door of that car. So we know that Orlando shot at least once behind him and hit Buntry's car. How many shots that neck bone may have shot downrange, we just don't know. We don't have that information.
So Orlando's car shot back and hit hit the car from Suge's entourage.
That's correct.
Did anyone get hurt or actually get hit, or just the car?
Just the car.
Just the car.
And then another parked vehicle was also struck.
Okay, so it was multiple shots there, basically. So it was just a full-blown shootout at that point.
Right.
Okay. How far did Suge get before his car stopped?
Approximately 1 mile. From the initial crime scene to the secondary crime scene, it's about a mile.
Okay, and what happened after the mile?
His car came to rest. Obviously, there's a law enforcement response to all of this. They get there. They begin to, immediately evaluate the situation. Suge's car is damaged, almost to the point where it's disabled, and the cops begin to try to figure out what had just taken place. They are trying to, get the things under control. They don't know if Suge Knight and the rest of the guys in this group are the suspects, are they victims, are they armed, are they not? So, initially there was some apprehension on behalf of Las Vegas PD, not knowing exactly what they were dealing with. Ultimately, they summoned an ambulance who came and took Suge and Tupac to the hospital.
Okay. Now, what happened when Las Vegas PD started to question the people in the vicinity?
It was a typical gang type of investigation where you just don't get a lot of cooperation. There was, the initial crime scene, remember, is now a mile down the road off of Koval and Flamingo, and most of the witnesses have gone away. People aren't just sitting around waiting to see if the police are going to come, because it's not like they were directly involved. So police began to question people, and you just didn't get a lot of cooperation. Yafu Fula and members of the Outlaws, who were in the vehicle behind Suge, along with Tupac's bodyguard Frank Alexander, they give brief descriptions. White car, multiple occupants, white Cadillac, and a guy with a gun, hanging out the window. But that's about the extent of it. No license plate, no positive IDs, and so that was the type of information Las Vegas was dealing with.
Now, what did Suge say?
Suge didn't initially cooperate. It took quite an effort to get him to come into the station. He was at the hospital that night. He did not cooperate at the hospital when the cops went over there to interview him. Ultimately, after repeated requests to come to the station, he showed up with his attorney, but he was very evasive, didn't provide any valuable information, and just basically says didn't know what happened.